And I am Chris Cuomo, and welcome to Prime Time. The central crime that launched the Russia investigation has now been directly linked to the Trump campaign. That link is Roger Stone, a man Trump has known longer and better than anyone involved in his campaign. Robert Mueller believes he has tied him to those DNC emails stolen by the Russians and dumped by WikiLeaks. And they do seem in this indictment to have a ton of evidence that there may have been material lies told to Congress by Stone. Stone says they've got nothing, and he is here to tell you that directly. The indictment is also a window into the campaign and multiple parties who may have made efforts to coordinate with Stone's efforts. So here are big questions. Who were the officials that Stone talked to? Who was the senior official that he interacted with? And most importantly, who was the person who directed that senior official to go to Stone for help about what else WikiLeaks had to damage Hillary Clinton? Cuomo's court will deliberate over those questions. The White House insists the charges of the president's associates have nothing to do with him. How is that possible? The two men that the president has known the best and the longest, Stone and Manafort, taking risks, allegedly committing crimes, supposedly on his behalf, and he didn't know? My argument on that is ahead. It's a huge night, so let's get after it. Now, I have to say, when indicted, most people become a ghost. You're lucky if you'll hear from their lawyer. But Roger Stone is not most people. He has decided not only to enter the safe space of the mothership at Fox tonight, he's also willing to come here. Obviously, his lawyers aren't going to want him to discuss the details of the case. We know that. But there's plenty to get into on the merits. Roger Stone, thank you for taking this opportunity, especially on a day like this.
Thanks, Chris. After that last panel, I feel some need to defend myself. I mean, John Dean, a man that I exposed as a perjurer and a liar in my book, Nixon Secret, simply by comparing his Senate testimony, his testimony to the Watergate special prosecutors, and his book, Preet Bharara, who lied to a federal judge about leaking federal grand jury information in the William Walton case, calls me a liar. Wow. Please. And right, Carl Bernstein, who's the subject of my next book, Woodward and Bernstein, the godfathers of fake news. So I'm glad to be here.
Let's not deal with trading barbs and allegations. Let's deal with what's before us right now.
They beat me up pretty good. I deserve the opportunity. Go ahead.
And that's why you're here tonight. I want you to have an opportunity to address what matters. Panel's not on my show. They're not here to defend themselves either, so let's move forward. You have told me in the past, I do expect that the probe is going to expose me to some type of action at some point. But you never expected what happened at your home this morning. Tell me about that.
Well, first of all, I always said that there could be some process crime.
Yes.
There's still no evidence whatsoever that I had advanced knowledge of the topic, the subject, or the source of the WikiLeaks disclosures. I never received any of the WikiLeaks disclosures. I never communicated with Assange or WikiLeaks other than the limited communication on Twitter direct message, which I gave to the House Intelligence Committee last September, I guess it was. On the other hand, I don't have a valid passport, either that or it's about to expire in a few days. I have no previous record. I do not own a firearm. I am not violent. And there was no need to have 29 FBI agents with assault weapons and sidearms and hand grenades and a battering ram to smash in my front door. They could simply have called my attorney and I would have surrendered voluntarily. My wife is deaf. She was in an upstairs bedroom. I had a concern that she did not know what was going on and could be shot or injured. My dogs are not dangerous. They're tiny, although they were terrorized. So when you don't have evidence, you use theatrics. I think this was an overreaction. And the real proof of it is the judge only hours later gave me a $250,000 surety bond on my own signature. So if you're a flight risk, they wouldn't do that. And
well,
as far
as
he
released you on your own recognizance, he didn't have to give you any bond. But when you say there's no proof, I don't want to dig into the merits. I know the legal counsel you've been given, and I understand it. I'm actually surprised they have you out at all. But when you say they have no proof, Roger, to be honest with you, I have not seen an indictment connected to this probe that has more proof than this one does of communications that you have had that prove that you didn't tell the truth to the Congress the congressional panel you were before.
False. Every one of those things is out of context. If you go to my website, Stone Cold Truth, or watch any of my interviews, I have actually refuted virtually everything in there. And then there's a bunch of things in there that, frankly, I don't believe are true. No senior campaign official told me to find out anything about WikiLeaks. That doesn't mean Mr. Mueller can't induce somebody to say that, but there'll be no corroboration for it. And no other person in the campaign who's a junior official inquired of what happened. Now, what I did hear from Steve Bannon the day after Assange had a press event on October 1st as to what he said, I responded with two matters of public record. Politico had already reported that he said there would be releases every week for the next following weeks, and that all the U.S. related campaign election related material would be released in the weeks before the election.
So the only communication you had with the campaign, just to be clear, Roger, to allow you to respond directly to what's in the indictment, if you're comfortable doing so, you're saying the only communication you ever had with anybody related to the campaign was this one communication you're talking about with Steve Bannon that you're saying is already public information?
It was published by the Times, and I responded to it in great written detail.
So that's
my response to him is entirely public information.
And that was the only communication.
And by the way, he didn't respond. That's the only one that I recall, and the only one that I can find in my emails. I never discussed this with Donald Trump. So speculation tonight by Wolf Blitzer, by Preet Bharara, by others that Trump directed me to do this or directed someone to direct me to do this. Speculation in the Washington Post that I ever discussed this. Chuck Todd asked me about this on Meet the Press a year ago. I told him no.
That's
George
still your answer.
Stephanopoulos asked me about it several weeks ago. I said, no, it's still my answer.
So there's a 100% chance in your mind that nobody can offer any compelling, credible proof that Donald Trump knew about your efforts to get to WikiLeaks.
Nobody can supply any corroborated truth. People can have their testimony composed, particularly if they're looking for a reduction in their sentence. But there is no proof here. Many of these things in the indictment I have already addressed and rebutted in great documented detail. And I have a pretty good idea, even though I have 1 million emails and I have never deleted anything whatsoever. But the idea that they need evidence, they've been in my email, my text messages, my phone calls for 2 years. They have read them to my various associates before the grand jury. The New York Times reported on January 20th that I was under 617, that I was under surveillance.
But that's why I'm wondering why you denied any of these things. You had to know they were surveilling you and they could get your communications when they were talking to you and asking you if you'd been talking to Credico, and you said, no, I've never communicated with them. Didn't you know that they'd be monitoring your communications and they'd get you the way they did?
Here's the irony of that. The text messages that were an old cell phone, which I did not recall, are entire exculpatory. They prove that he was my source, that, as I said, and he has denied, which MSNBC has allowed him to do repeatedly, and that his source was a WikiLeaks lawyer. So yes, I did honestly forget a series of text messages which prove that I was telling the truth.
But even the ones that you were having during the testimony, the same day, that's the one that really kind of jumps the shark. I mean, that they're saying, have you ever spoken to him about it? You say, no, you were talking to him that day. Again, I don't want to dig into the facts with you because I'm respecting your legal counsel. I don't even, first of all, I don't even know that that's true. But as far as Frank Patangeli is concerned, Mr. Credico is an impressionist. That's what he does. And he does a very funny Frank Patangela imitation. Certainly not an implication that he should kill himself or that he should lie. But you did tell him that he shouldn't testify, he should plead the fifth, don't turn anything over to them. That's why they're coming after you for tampering.
Context. I think all of those text messages need to be seen in some context.
Okay.
And when they're seen in context, they will see that they're lighthearted, they're not serious.
The only other thing that came up that was, I thought, kind of a bright line distinction was that they were asking you, well, who are you talking to? Who was helping you? Why didn't you want to mention Corsi? Why did you only want to mention Credico? Jerome Corsi says everything in the indictment is true, but why didn't you want to mention him? You would have saved yourself a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but first of all, Mr. Corsi has said a number of things that are not true. Firstly, that a memo that he prepared for me regarding the Podesta's extensive and lucrative business dealings is some part of a cover-up. Covering up what? He never told me that John Podesta's emails had been stolen. There is no corroboration or evidence in writing that proves that. That comes from his memory. He told Chucker Carlson, he told many people. He told Ari Melber, he told everyone he knew. Name one. He certainly didn't tell me, and there's no proof that he did.
But even if he was fabricating all that stuff, Roger, you do have the communications between the two of you. Mueller seems to have proof.
You know, in all honesty, I don't believe he was ever in touch with WikiLeaks, and the prognostications he made regarding WikiLeaks on August 2nd all turn out to be incorrect. I don't believe that he had any idea what he was talking about.
So here's the question: has nothing to do.
And he was not a campaign official. So they're trying to criminalize
definitely wasn't a campaign official.
And they're trying to criminalize legitimate, either journalistic or political inquiry. I don't think that's reasonable.
Well, they're getting you for lying about it. They're not saying that the underlying actions were criminal. They're saying that you lied about it to Congress, and they have the proof on paper. So the question I have is, forget about the merits. Why put yourself out there like this, Roger? You had a chance to change the testimony. Why would you even talk to them in the first place and put yourself at this jeopardy?
As you know, perjury requires both materiality and intent. There is none. But secondarily, where's the Russian collusion, Chris? Where's the WikiLeaks collaboration? Where's the evidence that I received anything from WikiLeaks or Julian Assange and passed it on to Donald Trump or the Trump campaign?
Well, look,
simply does not exist.
I agree with you on those bases. And again, I keep qualifying this because you know I want to keep my word. And I told you in council I wouldn't dig into the merits on this. But the argument would be the coordination is you're trying to find out what's happening. You're telling the campaign so that they, as Corsi was suggesting to you and maybe others, they could coordinate their message to synchronize what they were saying as the WikiLeaks got dumped. And that's why you were trying to find out if they had any more dirt about Hillary Clinton to help your friend in a campaign that you've believed in for a very long time. That might not be a crime, maybe not, but it is collusion.
But I wasn't doing that, and I will prove that at trial.
And you have said a couple of things already that are important for people. 100%, you never talked to the president about it. You don't believe he knew anything about it. Now, address people's skepticism. He's known you the longest, okay? He's got the deepest relationship with you, second only to Paul Manafort in terms of the population of this campaign, who, of course, you introduced him to, and you suggested him once again to help with the campaign. Why would people believe that his oldest, most trusted advisor was doing something like this for him at the same time that he kept talking up WikiLeaks, and yet he knew nothing about it?
Well, first of all, he can read, he can watch television, and this was getting an enormous amount of coverage. And any suggestion that we did discuss it would be conjecture, would be supposition. But there's no evidence to that effect. And first of all, when you talk to Donald Trump on the phone, in all honesty, he does most of the talking, you do most of the listening. We just never discussed this topic. There's been a great effort, and I've seen it here on CNN, to also conflate the emails released by WikiLeaks and the Hillary Clinton missing emails, which are two completely different things.
Yeah, I would never
conflate
had
those, never released them.
But they have nothing to do with anything.
But others have.
No, well, I would never do that. What WikiLeaks took, or whatever was taken and given to them, that's what you seem to want to know about, what was in there that might be of value to the campaign. And I'm just saying it's going to be hard for people to believe that the man who knew you best and longest and trusted you the most wouldn't have known what you were doing on his own behalf. Let me ask you something. You say you will not testify against the president. You would not bear false witness. I think that's an interesting phrase. But you are open to telling the truth. And is there any chance that the truth you have to tell can compromise other people who are a part of the campaign?
Well, certainly not the president. I have possess no information. I have to know what the circumstances would be, but it's highly unlikely. First of all, this idea that I was in regular contact with the campaign after Paul Manafort left is not true. Frankly, I didn't have a high regard for many of the people working there. The people in the grassroots, yes, but the people in Washington, many of them had no idea what they were doing, and they were not close associates of mine. So this idea that I was trying to curry favor with them, I have no reason to do so. I have a relationship with the president of 40 years.
Right.
So that is a misnomer. There's a New York Times story to that effect, that I was trying to burnish my reputation with the campaign, completely unnecessary and
Agreed.
false.
Agreed. I'm not saying regular contact. I'm saying any contact. And you brought up Paul Manafort. Did you have any idea that he had given poll data to one of his friends and he had met with another guy who was so closely connected to Russia about U.S. policy?
No, I never heard of that guy, Kalimnik or whatever.
Right.
I've seen his name in the paper. I was not familiar with him prior to the recent stories. Your second question.
He had also had a secondary meeting with somebody where they discussed U.S. policy vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine in a way that was very similar to how the party platform had been changed. Were you aware that Manafort was doing any of that?
No, I was not.
So here's my last question for you, Roger. This is a ballsy move that you're making here, coming out and taking on these charges once you've been indicted, especially with what I've read in this indictment. It makes me think that you must believe there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Do you believe that light is not the train, but that it is the president, and he will pardon you for keeping your mouth shut?
I've never had any discussion with him or communication with him regarding that. I have no idea what he might do. The only persons that I have recommended a pardon for is I wrote a number of op-eds as to why I think Julian Assange should be pardoned, because I believe he's a journalist who does the same thing that the New York Times and the Washington Post do. And I've come out very strongly and written the president for a pardon posthumously for Marcus Garvey.
But what about for yourself? Would you accept one?
The only two pardons I feel strong.
Would you accept one?
I don't expect to be convicted, so I'm not going to address it. I don't address hypothetical questions, as you know.
Would you entertain cutting a deal or anything short of going to trial on these charges?
Again, you're asking me to answer a hypothetical question without knowing any of the facts. I know that I'm innocent. My intention is to plead not guilty and to fight the charges. And I've had no discussion with anyone regarding a pardon.
You've never been in this situation before. You've been in a lot of jams over the years, but nothing like this. Are you worried that this is not going to go your way?
Well, I believe in God. I know what I have and have not done. I have a great wife and family that support me. I have to raise $2 million through StoneDefenseFund.com because I'm not a wealthy man. And the legal expenses so far have been very damaging, very devastating. Plus the censorship of my radio show on InfoWars, the censorship of my Facebook page, the shadow banning has made the selling of my books more difficult. So I have to raise a lot of money to defend myself. This is very typical. We saw this with General Mike Flynn, where the legal expenses are such that you end up pleading guilty to some crime which you did not commit. I don't intend to do that.
He admitted, as you know, he admitted lying about a couple of different material matters. But I take your point, and I really appreciate you on a night like tonight doing something that is very atypical, coming out and addressing the charges and the indictment against you, and I appreciate that.
Well, I was up a little earlier this morning than I had planned, so I could use a good night's sleep.
Roger Stone, thank you very much. As you know, we have someone who knows you very well, Kristen Davis, coming on the show to talk about what this means to you and her opinion as well. So there was Roger Stone. There you see Kristen Davis. She worked with Roger Stone. She shares a home with Stone that got searched by the FBI today, and she was questioned by Mueller's grand jury, not Stone. Her reactions next. All right, so look, this was a very big day concerning Roger Stone. His home in Florida wasn't the only one the FBI searched this morning. Agents also showed up at the Manhattan duplex that he shares with my next guest, Kristen Davis, once testified before Mueller's grand jury. Welcome back to Primetime. Thank you. I know this is not what you want to be doing right now, but you want to support your friend. How concerned are you?
I mean, I'm concerned. They've obviously indicted him already, and he's been arrested. I'm also concerned because I watched CNN all day long and everyone had an opinion, but nobody really knows Roger personally, and most of their opinions are based on their own agenda. So I think we should put some things in context.
Like?
I mean, first of all, Randy Credico, for example, there's all these...
Person number 2 in the indictment.
Right. Person number 2. We all know that. they're frenemies. They've had a horrible off and on relationship for 20 plus years. They threaten each other all the time, and then the next month they're going out to dinner. So a lot of these things are taken out of context. Randy Credico has personally threatened Stone on many occasions. They got into a fist fight in 2010 at one of my campaign events, instigated by Credico. So I think that people are seeing, oh, he threatened the dog. No, no, no. What he said was, I'm going to take your dog because Randy doesn't treat his dog well, and Stone's an animal advocate. So everyone wants to make him out to be this awful guy based on his public image, but that's just who he is as an entity.
You don't believe Roger ever intended to threaten him not to testify?
No, no. I think behind the scenes, Roger's telling him tell the truth. And that's where you see him actually threatening him like, hey, you sold your friends out. Why aren't you telling the truth? Why are you telling them that you're not the intermediary? I mean, quite frankly, I'm the one that, to my knowledge, that testified for the special counsel that Randy Credico was the intermediary. And then 2 weeks later, he was subpoenaed. So I've known this since 2016, since before it was even an issue.
Why do you think Roger went before the congressional committee in the first place? He could have pled the fifth.
I think he felt like it was his duty. I think he felt like it was his duty. He's been destroyed in the press. He's been under constant surveillance, or at least he believes to be. And he thought that by going there and giving him his side, that it would somehow alleviate the pressure of everything that's going on.
You know, Rudy Giuliani talks about this idea of a perjury trap. Can't put the president in front of Mueller's guys. It's a perjury trap. A perjury trap is where they only bring you in to prove that you're lying because they have you already, not for legitimate investigative purposes. Now, I'm not saying that's what this was, but Roger had to know when he was sitting there that they were asking him such specific questions 2 and 3 times. Did you ever talk to this person? You sure you never talked to this person? You never talked to this person? And there was enough information in the questions that he had to know they had his communications. I don't get where his head was on that, do you?
Well, Roger Stone gets roughly 1,000 emails a day.
So you really think he might not recall?
I really think, as someone who's testified in front of the special counsel, I don't recall half of what they asked me. And it's a stressful setting. You don't have any attorney present. Your adrenaline's flowing, and you just sort of zone out. So you remember 50%. So could I remember everything they asked me? No. I personally wouldn't answer a question conclusively, yes or no, because that's not safe.
You were part of this. Not only did you speak to Mueller, but you got the FBI calling you early this morning. Also, a little bit of irony. It was an FBI guy that you'd been in contact with in the past about a case that you were part of. What was that about?
You know, the way it was presented to me, they called me at about 6:15 and they said, hey, we're at your door. Please get ready and make yourself presentable, and we have a search warrant to execute. And it was the officer that arrested me in 2013. And he said, I've been sent. I don't know anything about this, but I've been sent because you know I treated you kindly in the past and you have a young child. We want to treat you kindly now.
But didn't you move?
I moved. So there's no joint duplex anymore. So I've moved.
So did they search the right place?
Well, Roger Stone doesn't have a New York apartment anymore. So his stuff is in storage. No, they searched the remnants of the apartment that we had that's currently being liquidated to storage.
Did you go to see what they would take?
No. I mean, most of the stuff is already out of there. It's already in a storage spot or being moved to a storage spot.
So you don't know what they got or whether there was anything to be had?
No, I don't particularly want to walk into a place where the FBI is. It's not my list of priorities.
Fair point. So here are the big questions. The 2 big questions I want your head on. First one will be easier for you. What is the chance that Roger Stone realizes these guys aren't messing around? This isn't a PR campaign. That this morning he got a taste of what kind of power these men and women have. And once his lawyers process what's in this indictment and see that this is a hard case he's facing objectively, do you think he would cut a deal?
No. I mean, I think Roger Stone is one of the most resilient men I have ever met. He manages to take a horrible situation and turn it around, and I've seen it all the time. So I never doubt him anymore. So I would say that he's don't count him out. And I also think there's a lot of legitimacy in the fact he's a 66-year-old man and forgetful, and people should be entitled to understand that he's also a human being. And being in a stressful situation, even such as this, you forget, you don't say what you want to say, you are not articulate. And he testified in front of the Senate, I mean, by himself, no attorney present, for hours. I can't expect any normal person would remember everything they said.
Yeah, he was in front of that House committee, and that's what got him into trouble. One other thing, what your head is on this. The hard thing for me to accept is that Roger Stone, who has known the president longer than anybody involved in that campaign, has believed in him as a presidential contender longer than anybody ever has, maybe even including the president himself. He's going out of his way to do these things. He's taking efforts. He's all over the place. He's contacting all these different people. And the man he's doing it for has no idea. You find that hard to believe? That doesn't expose Roger Stone, by the way. I'm not talking about him and his exposure. Do you believe that he'd be doing all this stuff and that Trump would know nothing about it, or you think that's protective Roger Stone?
I think what we know of Trump as a president is that he does what he wants, when he wants, and he doesn't really answer to anyone. So I think that's probably how he also ran his campaign, is that, like Roger said, when Trump calls, he talks, and you listen, and maybe provide a little bit of advice. And that's how he is as a human being.
Roger has said, I will not bear false witness, but he can tell the truth. And you know the old expression. In this case, for certain, the truth may set him free in terms of what this case could mean to him. Kristen Davis, I appreciate your perspective once again on this matter. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. All right, so look, there is a big question tonight, and you just heard me talking to Kristen Davis about it. We know what the investigators believe Roger Stone was doing, but he was doing it for someone else. He was doing it for Donald Trump. Maybe not directly. The suggestion is that the president didn't know. But that's the key question. That's something we have to digest with people who have done these cases many, many times. Cuomo's court's in session. Next.
This is CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Thank the Lord, good news. The government shutdown is over. Yes, for now. But look, for the families who have been hung out to dry, this is good news. President Trump signed a continuing resolution. It provides funding until February 15th. After that, we don't know what's going to happen. The president once again threatened another shutdown, among other options. It's hard to believe that the pain that he must now know for sure exists in a shutdown would be repeated. But the longest shutdown in American history without any funding for President Trump's border wall comes to an end. And we will stay on the story to see when people get paid back and to make sure they get back on their feet. All right, back to the big story. The latest Trump associate charged by Bob Mueller defended his innocence here on Primetime tonight, the same day he got indicted. Does Cuomo's court buy the case? Asha Rangappa, Neil Katyal, and Jim Schultz. Good to have all three of you. So, Asha, I start with you. Roger Stone says, I don't recall. I didn't do it. They can't prove it.
Mueller can definitely prove it. That's why he put it in the indictment. That means that he has the receipts. He has the evidence to back it up. So I think that Roger Stone might be in a certain amount of denial if he believes that that can't be substantiated with evidence. I also want to point out that Stone, tried to suggest that he had no direct contact with Russia or anyone from Russia. You have to read this indictment alongside the indictment that Mueller filed against the 12 GRU Russian intelligence officers for the hack of the DNC server. And in paragraph 44 of that indictment, there is a person who was in regular contact with senior members of the Trump campaign, who was in contact with Guccifer 2.0, who was doing the hack and then passing this to WikiLeaks. So I think that would be a good question to ask if there's another opportunity, because it's pretty clear that person in that indictment is Roger Stone. So there was definitely a direct link.
No, I remember that. Interesting, though, didn't come up in this indictment. Interesting. Mueller has this, Mueller's got this pattern of not always going as far as he can with each of these people the first time. And I know that could be a part of a circumspect strategy, but there is no mention of Guccifer 2 in this indictment. And I remember when that came out, we all thought it had to be Roger Stone. But what I'm struck by is the brazen defiance of what seems so obvious in this document. What would be Stone's play here?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I mean,
don't
it's
know.
nice, as you're, with all deference to your past guests, you know, that he likes dogs or something like that. But it's remarkable that he'd come on TV with such a brazen defense. As a lawyer, I'd always worry about any criminal defendant being on TV. I worried about it with Carter Page, for example, and the like. I don't worry about it here. And you want to know why, Chris? Because I think actually his audience is not the court. It's not Mueller. It's not even the American public. It's one person. It's Donald Trump. And what's going on is Roger Stone is following the president's December invitation and seeking a pardon. This is a president who pardoned Arpaio, who pardoned Scooter Libby for very similar crimes. And the Stone appearance here tonight on your show is acrid with the stench of a pardon. That's what's going on, and we should make no mistake about it. This isn't some guy who's trying to defend himself. You know, he's defending one person, Donald Trump.
Acrid with the stench of a pardon. Jim Schultz, let's go from poetry to prose. Do you think the president would consider pardoning Mr. Stone?
I have no idea whether the president would consider pardoning Roger Stone, and certainly his lawyers are going to advise him at this point in time that that's not a wise thing to be talking about at this point in time, especially in advance of the Mueller report coming out. So I don't think. Hopefully, we won't hear anything like that from the president.
Do you think he can pardon
weeks.
him, Jim?
I think he has the ability to pardon him if he so chooses.
Can he
That's
pardon
part of the
somebody to
presidency
keep
do
that
so.
person from incriminating him?
Well, look, I don't think you'll see anything at this point in time prior to Mueller, where you're going to see any movement to the Mueller report coming out, see any movement towards a pardon in this matter. This thing would have to be done and finished and long over before any of that is considered, I would imagine.
Asha, what do you think of that idea?
Well, I agree with that.
You're going to pardon Asha. You're going to pardon Stone because he won't testify against you, even though, to use Neil's phrase because it's a beauty, the acrid stench, and now I'm going to fill in my own word, of communications. The idea that Trump's longest time advisor and friend is doing all this stuff on his behalf at the same time that Trump is saying to the world that he loves WikiLeaks and he hopes there's more, and Trump didn't know a damn thing about it. What are the chances, Asha?
Well, it would be a little counterproductive for the president to pardon him, because if he pardons Stone, then Stone no longer has criminal liability for the actions that he has done, which means that he cannot claim the fifth in terms of if Mueller wants him to talk or if Congress subpoenas him again to come in. But, you know, what was really interesting to me, Chris, listening to this as a former investigator, your question to him was, do you think the president will pardon you? And Stone's answer was, I mean, we didn't have any discussions about it. It's not like we've discussed it or anything. And he mentioned like having some kind of discussion like 5 times. And maybe that's just where his mind goes. But I have to say, like, when people volunteer an answer, which is not actually the question you ask them, in a certain amount of specificity, my antenna goes up.
Neil.
Exactly. I 100% agree with Asha. I'm not saying the pardon is going to happen now. I'm saying that there's only one reason he'd be on your show tonight, which is ultimately to demonstrate his bona fides, go through trial. And look, if he believes all this stuff that he just said, which seems like nonsense when you read page 16 and other pages of the indictment, which are detailed allegations against him. But if he believes all that, he's going to have to take the stand and do it. And there's only one way he would take the stand and lie like that after he's already lied, and that's because he's confident at the end of the day there's going to be a pardon. Mueller is too careful and too conscientious a prosecutor to have the indictment that was issued today unless he knew he could back it up. And boy, there's email after email, text message after text message. It is devastating.
Jim, you see it the same way?
Yeah, there's some real problems here on paper as it relates to this indictment for Roger Stone, without question. He talks about context and other things that bring to it. No doubt about that. But here we go. Do not underestimate, Neil, Roger's love of the limelight here.
True.
This was a day where he walks out with his hands up in the air, signaling just like Richard Nixon did. He loves the limelight. He loves being on television. He loves being the object of this attention. So to say that he's just going on here to plead for a pardon to the president, who he's known for 40 years, not something he needs to do on television if he so chooses to do it. I mean, to say that he's out here, that's the only reason he's out defending himself, I think is underestimating.
You also said something else, guys. I don't know if you
Jim, I'm just reading the tweet that the president himself issued in December, which was effectively, Roger, stay firm, and and other people are rats and they're not going to get pardons, but someone like you is. So he's just following the president's lead here, which I found very damaging to the rule of law back in December.
Asha's point is smarter than where my head was on it about whether or not he'd be able to pardon, or would be seen as a self-pardon effectively because he was rewarding this guy for not going against him. But what it would expose Stone to in terms of susceptibility to further questioning is a great point, Asha, that would also have to be in the mix here and certainly works against a pardon. But there was something else he said that I thought was interesting. I said, if you were to tell the truth, because he said, I will not bear false witness, very biblical, there is one of the commandments. But will you tell the truth? Yes, I'll always tell the truth. Well, is there anything you could say that is truthful that would affect anybody else who was a member in the campaign? And he said, I don't know, not the president. That's something at play here too, Asha. He was talking to officials Mueller believes he can show, okay? And that is collusion. If they were working through Stone to try to find out what Russia was going to put through WikiLeaks, because they were told in July to be careful about Russian interference efforts and what they were doing online, and they're trying to get it and coordinate campaign message with what they think is coming from WikiLeaks, that's a problem, isn't it?
It is a total problem, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, Chris. The FBI gave this campaign a security briefing in late July, early August 2016, telling them, guess what? The Russians are trying to interfere in this election. They may reach out to contact you, and if they do, please let us know. That's what the FBI does. And then this is happening, but there have been contacts before that they don't report, and then this goes on after. And I just want to add on the point about Roger Stone's potential contacts directly with Guccifer. Remember, I think the problem when you have a counterintelligence investigation that converges into a criminal one is that you may not want things that you have gleaned from sensitive, confidential, classified sources like NSA intercepts, allies giving us intelligence, to show up in a criminal indictment, which then needs to be disclosed publicly. So that could be a reason that some of those pieces did not show up here. They showed up in the other indictment because Mueller doesn't expect the GRU officers to show up in court and actually challenge it. But here he does have that possibility.
Also a better point than I had in my head. Let me ask you this, before I let you guys go. Who thinks that Stone cuts a deal? Nobody. You think all of you think he rides this out on the basis of what's in this indictment?
Cuts a deal with the president.
Just with the president?
I think he cuts a deal with the president, absolutely. And, and he defends himself at trial, for Asha's point. He loses and ultimately gets pardoned. But this is a remarkable indictment. We end where you began, Chris. This is someone who's very close to the president for 40 years. He knows the president better than almost anyone, indeed even better than his wife. But, I guess it's not saying that much. So there is something really, really significant about today's development.
Give me a button, Jim. Final thought.
And let's not forget, Chris, I think there's an interesting point to be made here. That there is some indication that the Clinton campaign was reaching out, trying to stop all of this from coming out as well, and reaching out to folks in order to stop it. Remember, these are political campaigns. They're looking for dirt on one another. They're trying to use dirt against one another.
There's a difference between trying to find WikiLeaks to give you emails that Russia stole.
Let me finish, Chris.
I'm just saying I don't like false equivalencies.
There's been no facts or evidence so far, or even an allegation that anybody from the Trump campaign had contact with the Russians relative to the intrusion into the DNC servers, the hacking and the stealing that went on there.
But they do know that his oldest and most trusted advisor was trying to get an advance on those things to help the campaign. It's not about a crime.
In the dissemination
it's about collusion
there was
and wrongdoing,
nothing
Jim.
relating to the dissemination of it either. But you're right, Chris, as it relates to, hey, when is this going to happen? Is there going to be something?
Yeah.
Can we get a heads up? Those things seemingly were going on according to this indictment, but there's no indication that they were involved in this, in the theft. There's no indication that they were involved in the public dissemination. Remember, this was all in the public domain.
That's a legal
and it was after
standard.
it ended up in the public domain that folks started asking questions.
That's a legal standard for a felony. This is going to be a political process. There's going to be a report out that tells a story about who did what and what the president knew and when.
No question.
And you don't have to have a crime, let's be honest, for an impeachable offense. It's whatever Congress says it is. Guys, you made us better tonight. This is why I have smarter people on the show as guests, thanks to each and all of you. All right, so look, a lot of this is about how you want to see things when you look through the lens of this. That's been true about the Mueller probe from the beginning. But there are some things that you can look at in the indictment today and what Roger Stone told us, and it creates some provocative thoughts for what happens next. I got to tell you, this is a tough one to figure out. You do not see people in Roger Stone's position going on television, let alone the day they are indicted. So what does that mean? Does it mean what we're hearing speculated on by those brilliant lawyers, that he just loves the limelight? He loves it. He wants to put himself out there. This is his moment. Or does it mean that he doesn't get what he's up against? D. Lemon, come on in here and help me have some perspective.
It could be both.
Could be both. Could be both.
Could be both.
But here's why I don't get it. All right, here's just one paragraph from the indictment, okay? Mm-hmm. And they only need one lie to get you, okay? Written communications between Stone and person one, Jerome Corsi, and person two, Randy Credico, continued through his testimony. Indeed, on about September 26, 2017, the day that Stone testified before the committee and denied ever having sent or received emails or text messages from person two, Credico, Stone and person two, Credico, exchanged over 30 text messages. On the day I asked you if you've ever talked to someone and you told me you didn't, you talked to them 30 times. They got you right there. I don't get his play here. Help me.
Well, I can't help you. I mean, I'm flummoxed by it. To me, it's a big deal because we learned that senior campaign officials reached out to Stone about WikiLeaks. That's a big deal.
And who directed that senior official?
And who directed that? Listen, and as far as Roger Stone, he says there are no charges of collusion. Of course, not right now, but Mueller's not going to.
Oh, no, there's collusion. Collusion is not a crime, it's a behavior.
Yeah.
What Manafort did was collusion, if true. What is that? Oh, is that him doing the peace sign?
That's him. But this is a long time ago. This is a long time ago. This is when he was kicked off of Twitter for saying disparaging homophobic things about me, also about Jake Tapper, and other folks.
He is capable of incredible ugliness.
Yeah.
He'll call himself a street fighter. He can explain it any way he wants.
He lives a couple blocks away from me, by the way. Did you know that?
But, well, I don't know if he does anymore. I think they got rid of that. Kristen Davis said they got rid of that duplex they used to have.
Up in Harlem?
But he's never been a fool. And it makes me wonder if he isn't playing a long game of hoping the president saves him. But I got to tell you, that's more complicated than you think, even at this point.
Well, and you don't know because, listen, I'm not saying it was, but what if it was, what if the senior, who is the senior official? What if the senior official was the guy, right?
The president?
Yeah.
No, the president would have to be the person who directed that person. If he fits into the equation at all, that would be how. But let's pick it up at the top of the show.
Okay, but just so you know,
please.
1 count of obstruction, 2 to 6 counts of false statements.
Yes.
And then
7
witness
counts.
tampering.
2 of them are about him messing with Credico in the process. 5 are lies. I'll see you right at the top.
Director Clapper, we'll see you. We'll be on.
Clapper, great guest. All right, so what did the president know? That's the question. And what you've heard every time with Manafort and now with Stone, this has nothing to do with him. He doesn't know what those guys are doing. I'm going to remind you of the defense that's been offered, and then we're going to blow it to pieces with nothing but the truth. Next.